أصحابه وأحبابه والتابعين وعنا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. أما بعد، فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So what I will try to do is go over this topic as much as I can in the next maybe 45 minutes, and then open the floor for questions, comments, criticism, whatever you all have in mind. So first, I want to start by what's advertised and how do we raise kids? How was the advertisement? Anybody remembers?
How to raise children Islamically in the West?
Yeah. How to raise children Islamically in the West. So I really want you to take out this issue of the West. There is no more difference between the East and the West. The differences have become minimal. Basically, we live in a culture, in a pretty much universal culture. For those of you who travel like the way I do, unfortunately, I travel throughout the world. Asia, Africa, I was just in Africa. I travel all over the world. I tell you, maybe 20 years ago, maybe before the internet revolution, you could see still some variations in cultures. But I can tell you, whether it's good or bad, and I'm not necessarily saying it's all good, there's always some good in it. But the variations in cultures are really dissipating. And you're really having universal culture and universal values, whether you are here or you're in many other places in the world. So, and the reason for that is the source of information. In the old days, before the internet, the source of information was the culture, the parents. Today, the source of information is no more the culture and the parents. The source of information is schools, social media, the internet. That's where people go. When you ask anybody, they say, wait, let me Google it. That's the source of information. And whether we see it or not, but I'm sure you all see it, there are universal values that are being brought. And those universal values really sideline cultural, parental, familial, even religious values. They're not as important because what's being presented always and emphasized and reinforced are those values. So if I was you, I would not really, if I was to advise my brothers, Allah bless them, and sisters who wrote the poster, take out the issue of the West, because there's really no East and West in that sense as much anymore. That's one. The other aspect I don't like you to use that is because I wouldn't want us here as Norwegian Muslims to put it us versus them. Us and then them. There is really no us versus them. Let's be very honest here. For many reasons. Now, I'm not naive about racism that exists in many cultures. I'm not saying here, actually Norway is probably one of the more decent places when it comes to racism and discrimination. Obviously the law prohibits discrimination anyway, and I found racism to be minimal per se, let's say. So I'm not pretending there are no problems. There are problems, obviously, or let's say there are challenges. But if we're going to live in this country and be Norwegian Muslims, we're going to be part of the fabric of this country. We are going to contribute to this country. Our children are going to be raised in this country. And probably then our grandchildren are going to be raised in this country. It doesn't help to say us versus them. And therefore, I think it's very important that, I was telling the brothers the past couple of days, when we're talking, we address ourselves as Norwegian Muslims, because that's who you are at the end of the day. And if you don't identify yourself as such, you're already setting yourself for, I'm still the stranger here. And there are challenges, but I think it's very important to own up and to work the way through. So that's one. The way I look at it in this, just so we can, before we get into the topic, is we all agree on certain values, meaning Norwegian Muslims, Norwegian Christians, Norwegian Jews, Norwegian atheists, whatever people are. There's some universal, there's some values that we all agree. I think people would agree that trustworthiness is good. Truthfulness is good. The rule of law is good. Right? So equal human values as far as worth, radical value of a human being. That's something we all agree on. So I think the important thing, a good approach would be, let's identify values that are already taught and preached and nurtured by the wider society, and let's say here in Norway. And then that we also, as Norwegian Muslims, let's say, agree with that, and I think believe in that, right? Positive contribution, all that stuff, and then focus on that. So the first thing I'd like to say is, and let's keep that, I'll come back to it, let's go to the foundation. Islamically speaking, as a Muslim, your job does not end at biologically fathering or mothering a child. That's not where your job ends. Al-Quran al-Kareem makes it very clear. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara waquduha an-nas wal hijara. Qu anfusakum wa ahlikum, Al-Quran al-Kareem says, which means what? Save yourself and your families from torments, lots of torments. I mean, if people lose their, let's say, compass, their ethical value compass, their principles, their direction in life, that's a torment already. Save yourself from a torment that's fueled by people, and save yourself and your families. So Al-Quran al-Kareem insists that families are part and parcel of what you need to be looking forward to as far as responsibility. It's responsibility, and that's why the prophetic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. All of you are responsible, and everyone is responsible for whatever they're responsible for. Right? You're responsible for the well-being of your family. Meaning, as if Islam is saying, look, your job is not simply to put a loaf of bread on the table. That's important. Get a decent loaf of bread. Get a halal loaf of bread. Earn it right. Put it on the table. But what's more important than just what goes into the stomach is what goes into the mind. And what's more important than what goes into the mind is that what goes into the heart. They're all nutritional. They all have nutritional values. And your job as a parent should not simply be the one who puts the loaf of bread and then does not really care about what kind of food goes into the mind and what kind of food goes into the heart. Because then what goes into the stomach, you know where it comes out of. And what goes into the mind and the heart is what makes the human being. Those are the set of values, the set of principles, the set of virtues that you stand up for. Otherwise, other than that, we all eat the same food, more or less. I mean, we're all eating the same kind of food. We're all eating the same, more or less, we're doing the same thing. So, it's important for especially young couples, let's say, people who are having children, people who have children, to realize that their responsibility is not, well, you know what, I need to go work, you need to go work. I'm not saying anything. But when you have children, when Allah Azza wa Jal graces you with the ni'mah of having children, that comes with responsibility. Now, if you're not willing to take responsibility, you might need to think about it. But if you're wanting to have children, you're going to have the most important thing that you need to put is time investment. If you outsource the education of your children to YouTubes, I'm not saying YouTube is bad, and I'm not saying YouTube is good. On YouTube, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's everything. So if you father the children and you bring bread on the table for them, and then you outsource their education to social media and YouTubes and all that stuff, unmonitored and undirected in a sense, then you're not really doing your responsibility from a principles of faith towards your children, and also from a principle of society. Because some of the problems that we've had historically speaking, in the past, historically meaning in the past 20, 30, 40 years, when people went a little bit crazy, how did they go crazy? They went on the internet, they ended up with bad ideas, they went and did those bad ideas. So having unregulated sort of avenue of information, I think is not necessarily healthy, and the parents need to be involved. One very important thing that Al-Quran Al-Karim puts about parenthood, that we're starting to talk about, how do we raise our children in societies nowadays, let's say. Well, first of all, parents need to be involved. And if you think you're just going to be able to go to your work, do everything that you want to do, and acquire more, and I don't have anything against you acquiring more. I don't have anything against you pursuing your careers and professions. In fact, I want to encourage you to do so. I'd like you all to be, if you want to be rich, I'd like you all to be rich, if that's what you like. If that makes you happy, then, all the power to you. Please be rich. I definitely would want to tell you you should be educated and pursue higher education. I always say there's always a justification for higher education. Absolutely, positively, all the time. And if you think it costs you money and it slows your career development, I tell you, education, no matter how expensive it is, it's worth it. Because if you don't believe me, try ignorance. See how expensive it is. All right, so it's very important to pursue that. Now, whatever you want to do on your education path, on your educational path, on your career path, that's fine. But you cannot neglect children and think that just because you put them in front of TVs or whatever it is, you do not have to bother with that. You come home late, right, and you're tired. There's no time for you to do anything. You can barely eat, and everyone goes to sleep, and the next day happens. Well, you're not investing. And if you don't invest, and you think somehow your principles, virtues, and values will transfer to your children through osmosis at night, you are delusional. Sorry, right? Usually it's not, osmosis is not going to happen. And no simple diffusion. It's really active transport, requires ATP. In other words, it requires energy and effort and a lot of repetition. Ask parents, how many times do you have to repeat to your children? How many times do you have to have the patience? It's becoming a parent. It's an art almost. So the first thing I want to say, like Al-Quran Al-Karim says, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, save yourself and your children and your families. You have to invest. If you do not invest time, the most important thing, and let me just tell you, let me take it a little bit further, and I'm starting a little bit chaotic without any organized thoughts, but they're just in my head every here and there. If you think that you're going to send your children off to Sunday school at the mosque, and the mosque will raise your children for you, you're also sadly mistaken. If you think if you outsource the education of your children will be unrelated to you. Culturally, religiously, everything. You didn't really raise them. You fathered them, sure. So their genes are yours. You mothered them, but they're not really yours. And that's very important. And I understand, because all of us work. All of us have things to do. All of us are so busy, and 24 hours are not long enough for everybody. I understand that. But if you want to have children, you have to put time. And that time is not just to simply sit and all of you are watching TV or all of you are watching a program or so. That could be part of it, but that should not be it. There has to be active parenting. And active parenting is not always lecturing. That's also something, so I want to also talk about that. It's not sitting and telling the kids, you need to be honest, you need to be truthful, you need to be nice to your neighbor, love love each other. Yeah, all that is good. The lecture part is there. Lab. You know how when you take any science at any decent university, there is a part of lecture and the other part is lab, right? You can't take chemistry only lecture. I mean, you can't do that. C6H12O6 plus H2O, H3CO2 plus H2. That doesn't work, man. You have to. Right? SO3, SO4. You have to start going to the lab and mix stuff up and do all that business together, right? The same thing, the tarbiyah, education, lab. Now, those of you many of you are maybe born here in this country, but ask the elderly amongst you. And I can tell you, I've obviously lived most of my life in America, so but I was able, when I was 10, 12 years old, to still see some of what the old generation used to do. One, they used to go to the cemetery, let's say, to visit our grandparents. The father would take the children with them, right? Let's say on Jumu'ah, on Eid, on other occasions, and say, son, this is your grandfather's grave. This is your grandmother's. This is your uncle. This is your aunt. Now make dua for them. Learn to pray for them. And this is the rest of the people. We don't know them. But as you enter the cemetery, pray for all those people who are buried here. Remember? Bismillah as-sunnah. Assalamu alaikum dara qawmin mu'mineen. Right? Alright. Sunnah fi Sahih Muslim hadith. That's actually learning. It's not learning through lecture. It's learning through practice and laboratory. It's sort of practical learning, and that's very important. If you don't do it now, well, you're cutting the link between your ancestors and your offspring. You'd be cutting that link. You'd be cutting the tradition yourself. And if you do it yourself, don't expect them to somehow, magically speaking, grow up with all these values that you like. That's why, again, I'm going to say, one of the most important points about parenthood is time investment. And time investment, again, is in being in lecture and in practice. And part of the practice, for example, and I'm not here to give you all the examples. You probably can come up with better examples and more examples. But for example, how do we teach the kid to be generous? Sharing, selfless, all right? So we go to Jummah, let's say, right? You plan to give $2, let's say sadaqah. You should be giving more, but anyway. You take $1 to yourself, or you take the $2, you give them to your son or your daughter. Say, these $2 are for you. What I'd like you to do, keep one and give one for the sake of Allah. All right? Or maybe you do it in kroner. Right? You give her or give him, like, let's say 10 kroner, 2 5s. You have 2 5 notes? All right. 5 you keep. The other 5 I want you to give. Share. And let's say Jummah, let's say in Eid, let's say you see a poor person. It's very important to teach them the lecture of you need to be generous, you need to share, you need to be selfless. But that, just the talk is not enough. You actually, as a parent, have to demonstrate that. Other thing, let's say, you can tell them pray until you're blue in the face. They're not going to pray if you're not praying. Right? You tell them pray, 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 but they look at you and you're not praying. They're not going to pray. You're going to tell them pray is so important, you have to pray. Who cares? You're not praying. Why should I pray? Right? So, we had to make something, change something and say, let's say, if we're all at home, Jama'ah is going to be at home if the masjid is far away. So it becomes a family event as well. It's important to bring the children, like one of the important things, to anchor them to the masjid. Now, masajid are not perfect. You all know that. Well, you're not perfect. Nobody is perfect. Even I'm not perfect, believe it or not. None of us is perfect. Alright? And even though as perfect as you are, you also are not perfect. And that means we need to participate. If you don't, what you remember from your parents? Well, he used to take us with him to the masjid. We used to be part. He would take part in the masjid, take ownership in the masjid, do something, help with something. That becomes your stamp, and that's what your children will remember after you go. That, you know what? My father was part. No matter what happened, he was part there. And you know what? I'm also anchored there. So it's become sort of anchoring. Again, we go back to the issue of lecture and lab. Faith is not just theory. Faith is a practice. Faith is an experience. And therefore, you can talk to them about faith all you want. If there is no practice, it becomes then not something that's applied, and therefore they may not benefit from it as much. So, with that, I want to say, all right, where do we start with the issue of the tarbiyah, or raising kids? I think one of the most important things is the theory and the practice of Iman. What does that mean? The theory and the practice of Iman. Faith. We believe in the creator of all. So Muslims call the creator of all Allah, which means the creator of all. Al-Khaliq. The creator of all. So we believe in the creator of all. We believe that the creator of all is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-hearing, all-kind, Sami', Basir, Qadir, right? Wadud, Latif, all-loving, all-kind, Ghafoor, all-forgiving. So, right, how do we know the creator? So we start teaching the kids who the creator is. And the creator is closer to you than you are to yourself. The creator of all, Allah Azza wa Jal, is not light. He's the creator of light. He is not energy. He's the creator of energy, the creator of all. He's not gravity. He's the creator of gravity. He's not a human being. He's the creator of human beings. He's not subject to the time-space dimension. From when t time was equal 0 and s space equals 0. He's the creator of the space-time dimension. He's not subject to the creation. The creation is subject to him. He's not imagined in imaginations, because the imaginations are limited. And anything imaginations imagine are imagination created. And he is not created. He's the creator of everything created. لم يكن له كفوا أحد. There is nothing like him. He is nothing in the world of matter, because he does matter. He creates. He is the creator of matter. Nor is he something in the world, in the realm of imaginations, because he's the creator of it. So how do we know him? Well, we know him, like I said, he's the all-knowing, the all-hearing, the all-seeing, the all-kind, the all-powerful, the almighty, the all-loving, the all-forgiving. Closer to you than you are to yourself. Closer to you than your jugular vein. Yet he's not conceived in the minds of limited creation. Nor is he comprehended by the understandings of the creation, except that he's the one worthy of worship, for nothing else is like him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. basic understanding. Who do we worship? We'll talk about that tomorrow. But anyway, so the first thing is that we do believe in the creator of all. Allah Rabbul Alameen. Rabbul Alameen, yani the creator of all. Right? We believe in the creator of all. That we believe that this, we're not shy from disagreeing with creationism. Or agreeing with creationism, saying that we believe that everything is created. We believe that everything has a beginning, and everything that has a beginning will have an end. The only one that doesn't have a beginning or an end is the creator of all, subhanahu wa ta'ala. We also believe that the all-kind creator of all sent us messengers and prophets throughout history. From Adam to Noah, to Abraham, Ibrahim, Nuh before him, to Musa, Moses, to Jesus, Isa, to Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. We love them all, revere them all, honor them all, and believe all their messages were true messages from the creator of all. Their messages are very simple. Be the best you can be. You are the creation of the creator of all. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We've created the human being in the best of ways. So, congratulations, you are a perfect creation, despite your imperfections. But you're a perfect creation. Reach your potential. Be the best you can be. That's the message of the prophets. It's not a burden. That's what we also need to teach our children. That being a Muslim, following Isa, Jesus, following Musa, Moses, following Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's not a burdensome task. They're telling you is to be the best you can be. Alright, so that's very important. We also need to tell them that we believe that the prophets and messengers came with messages. What are those messages? If I ask you what religion is from an Islamic perspective, or from any really perspective, what's the anatomy of religion? When we say religion, all right, what's the anatomy? What is religion composed of? Three things. One, articles of faith. What you believe in. Two, law. Do, don't. Don't kill. Don't cheat. Don't steal. Don't lie. Alright, do. Be good. Say the truth. Help. Share. Care. Love. Right? Etc. So law. Third thing is what? Value system. We call it akhlaq, don't we? What's akhlaq? Value system. Value system. So what does that mean, value system? Well, you should be honest. That's value. That's a value. Generous. That's a value. Virtue. Patience. That's a virtue. Sharing. Selfless. Being selfless. That's a virtue. Courageous. Brave. That's a virtue. Chivalry, believe it or not. Yani futuwa. Right? Manhood. Not against womanhood. Just chivalry, futuwa. Nobility, dignity. Those are all values. So, when we look at religion, we see articles of faith, number one. Number two, law. Number three, what? Value system. What do we teach of religion nowadays, in general? We teach part of the second thing. We teach the law. Do, don't. We don't teach the articles of faith. Who do we worship? Why do we worship the creator of all? Why nothing else is worthy of worship but him? What makes all these things we don't talk. And the value systems we're not touching either. We're just teaching people what? Do, don't. Right? And I hear that mostly when people embrace Islam. They, hey, don't do this, don't do this, do this. But I mean, Islam is much more wider than the list of do's and don'ts. Print the list of do and the list of don'ts and give it to people if you want. But Islam is much more wider. The understanding of Islam, the philosophy of how we look at things and all that stuff that comes with it. Alright. The reason I'm saying that again is the importance of parenthood, especially in all these three things. But most importantly, in the issue of articles of faith, who do we worship? And then the value system. The value system of all the prophets more or less are the same. Yani Abraham and Noah alayhim as-salam did not come and to tell people cheat and steal and kill, did they? Be honest, be good, right? Be responsible, be chivalrous, be brave, be noble, be giving, be etc. All that, honest, right? All right, very nice. The same. So where do we focus on? We've said we believe that Allah sent prophets, messengers, revealed with them messages. Those messages are meant to give people a roadmap. Now so what do we tell our children about that? Well, we believe that the messengers and the prophets came, so Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam came with a message. That message is a roadmap. What do you mean by roadmap? In times of confusion, you need a guide to tell you, all right, if you want to reach safety, this is where you go. This is the best way to do things. Ancient wisdom that your ancestors and humanity has experienced for for thousands of years. The message of the prophets alayhim salatu wassalam are like the roadmap. If you go by this roadmap, you shall reach not only safety, but you'll maximize your potential in this dimension and in the next dimension. If you don't, you're going to struggle. Now, you say, wait a minute, so if I am religious, I won't struggle? Oh, you will struggle either way. But there's a different kind of struggle. From a point of faith, this dimension is not a dimension where it's struggle-free. It's the dunya. And dunya means the lower dimension. And lower dimension means there's struggle. Why? Because we believe that the Creator enabled us humans to do good or evil. Right? Can you do good or evil? Sure you can. I have a bottle of water right now and I can throw it at his face. Right? I have that power. Yeah, Allah enabled me. Or I can give him a flower, let's say. Allah enabled me either way. Since I'm enabled to do good or evil, will we always choose good? Sometimes we don't choose good. Sometimes we choose wrong. Since there's going to be evil, there's suffering, there's problems, there's challenges. So no one is saying that this dunya will be challenge-free. But faith makes it easier. Faith empowers you. Faith helps you. Faith allows you, gives you the space to grow. You see, what happened is, few decades ago, let's say 60s, even here in Norway, how was the family structure in the 50s and the 60s? I wasn't around, obviously. I mean, I'm not that old. But I can imagine how things used to be. The family structure was much more present. The nuclear family was important. There were family values much more visible. I'm not saying there aren't now, but they were much more visible, much more central, nuclear to the family, and all that. So what do? Not just here, everywhere. So we took a religious aspect. People went to churches more, right? They were connected in one sense or another. Let's say non-Muslims. And Muslims also went to their mosques and masajid. So now you took religiosity out, that's deconstructed, right? The religiosity in general anyway. The postmodern era is a deconstructionist era in general. You deconstruct big things. Alright, so you deconstructed religiosity as a whole. You deconstructed family now. Alright? And now, even after the deconstruction of families, we went after the individual. We're deconstructing the individual identities entirely. One by the other. Right? Boom, boom, boom. To the point that there's a loss. What am I? Today I'm something, tomorrow I'm something else. Whatever. Right? When we've taken all... But let me ask you this. Places of worship. families, and all that. What did they also provide? Support structure. Right? The masjid, what does it provide? Support structure. The church provided support structure to those attendees. It supported them in one way or another. Gave them, all right, families, when they were the families and everybody sat around the table and they gathered around holidays and everybody was there and all that stuff, and parents had more meaningful thing. It was support structure as well. Take all that out and people remain without support structure. So now we need lots of other things. We need help. Because we feel alone. There's nobody. You want to live alone? You're alone. You're already alone anyway. The support structure is no longer there. It's been deconstructed, and therefore, and I'm not saying I don't want anyone to misconstrue that to say there's no legitimate reasons for lots of psychological help, but a lot of it, or not many of it also, or some of it, let me say, some of it is also due to a lack of support structure. There's no more the social support structure that used to exist. So I am really in need now of another element to help me cope with my daily reality. Whether this is in the form of pills, in the form of counseling, in the form of etc., 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 etc. And that's the absence of many of these roles. And therefore I think it's very important that we participate in that. And the masjid, you be part of a community, will give some support structure, but it's also giving what you also plant. Meaning, if you want the masjid to give to you, you have to give to it. Meaning you have to be part of it. It's your community. Whatever you put, the water that you put, is how the tree grows. You don't put water, trees don't grow. Usually trees don't grow on their own without water. Alright. So, I think that's very important. That's the first thing. So we teach the children, obviously, that we believe in the Creator of all, of everyone. And that's what that Creator of all affords all human beings, irrespective of their background. Justice, equality, redemption. It's the Creator of all. He is the Creator of everyone. Sent prophets and messengers with messages. Those messages are not meant to be association means superiority. Unlike what some religious do. And some religious, they think that merely by association I am better. I am better than the others. That becomes a problem on its own anyway. Those messages are meant to help one reach their full potential, right? And we believe that there will be a day of accountability. Because we believe that the Creator is just. The Creator of all is just. And if you do bad things and you get away with it, well, you really don't get away with it. There's no getting away. And that gives the faithful an incentive to never do wrong. Whether the police are watching him or the police are not watching him. Whether someone is observing him or her, or someone is not observing him or her, that they need to be good anyway, because bigger than who's observing them and better is the Creator of all, right? And in that, an old story that people bring all the time, allegedly about Sahl bin Abdullah al-Tustari, one of the Zuhad or Ubbad about 1,000 years ago, who was 5 years old or so in what is today, what do you call it, kindergarten? What do you call kindergarten here? Okay, that's too difficult for me. So, kindergarten. Right? And the teacher was telling them, they were trying to play hide and seek. I hope you also have that in Norway, hide and seek. So, and the teacher told them, everyone needs to go and hide somewhere where no one sees you. And the kids all went and hid somewhere, one under the tree, one behind the cows, one behind whatever. They all hid. except Sahel. Sahel remained in front of the teacher. And the teacher asked him, why didn't you go and hide like all the other kids like you? He said, teacher, you told us go hide somewhere where no one sees you, and everywhere I go, Allah sees me. So, putting something like that in their mind and teaching them that the Creator of all sees you. So, you're always encouraged to do good. You will do wrong, but you're always encouraged to do good. It's very important. And one of the things that allegedly he used to teach is to bring himself that I am observing that the Creator sees me. Allahu nadhiri, Allahu shahidi, Allahu ma'i. Allah sees me, Allah is witnessing me, Allah is with me. Allahu shahidi, Allahu nadhiri, Allahu ma'i. Allah sees me, Allah witnesses me, Allah is with me. My Lord is with me, my Creator is with me. I think that's also very important to sort of, when we talk about a principles of faith, how do we bring about or how do we experience faith? Alright, so we believe that also among the part of belief that we tell children that there will be a day of accountability. مَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. Whoever does an atom worth of good will see. Whoever does an atom worth of evil will also see. They'll be rewarded accordingly. Right? So what does that teach the children? Like the Prophet ﷺ teaches us in the authentic hadith. وَرَجُلٌ, and a human being who gives in his right hand and his left hand does not know what his right hand gave. Right? Now what is this prophetic teaching about? That you don't make it, if nobody knows how much good you did, that's the point. Because the Creator of all knows. And that's all that matters. To the point that your left hand doesn't know what your right hand gave. That's the one that Allah loves. And what does that in return also gives? If you do something evil and no one sees, Allah sees. If you do something good and no one sees, Allah sees. And you'll be rewarded accordingly. So that's practical faith. Again, when we talk about how do we raise the children in our environment and where we live in nowadays times, well, I mean, experiencing faith. Now we move from the aspect of faith or the dimension of faith to the second dimension, which is al-janib al-akhlaqi, or the virtue-based tarbiyah. Well, akhlaq, again, is very important. I spoke about it at the beginning, I'm coming back to it. There is no way that we can raise our children and ourselves. Here's the point. From an Islamic perspective, we believe that we're all perfect, yet imperfect. Meaning, we can become more perfect. Let's put it this way. So, nobody's offended. Alright, what does that mean? It means like Allah Azza wa Jal told us in the Quran. Now the longest qasam, the longest oath in the Quran, fi Surah Shams. That's the longest. 11 verses. All qasam, qasam, qasam. Qasam means Allah is swearing by something. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa-Shams, by the sun. And wa-Duhaha, and its dawn. والقمر, and by the moon, إذا تلاها, والنهار, by the day, إذا جلاها, والليل إذا يغشاها. You know, the Quran Kareem goes until he says the last thing. What is the jawab of the qasam? قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. Right? What is the whole qasam Allah is invoking about what? Successful is the one who refines themselves. Loser are the ones who don't refine themselves. I can't tell you how important this is for adults and children and so-called wise people and big people and small people and all people. Successful are those who refine themselves. Tazkiyah. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. And that's the most difficult, especially on adults. It's difficult. Why? A lot of people don't think they need to refine themselves. They think they're already perfect. Why should I refine myself? There's not even a recognition that I need to actually, in an active process, يعني عملية تربوية, active process of actually doing tazkiyah, active process of betterment. يعني I have a set of bad habits, a set of good habits. I actively need to start to really change those habits that are bad and make them actually good. And if I don't, I am not involved in that. I am deluded that in my perfection. And if you become deluded in your imperfection, it becomes a problem because you don't see the need that you need to improve and be more perfect or better. And that's a concept in Islam, obviously, which is tazkiyah, right? What is tazkiyah or akhlaq? Tazkiyah is realizing that I need to actually keep refining myself, and that process does not end until we die. There's no completion per se. It's completion after completion after completion after completion. You go from higher to higher to higher to become Muhammadan eventually, meaning acquiring Muhammadan characters. Jesus' characters, Moses' characters. Close to, basically for us, close to perfection character. This is an ongoing process. And I can't tell you how difficult it is, including to students who they sign up for, let's say, tazkiyah and tarbiyah and all this. Come and try to tell them you need to change this habit. Oh, Shaykh, how many times are you going to tell me this? Until you change. That's how many times. If you don't want me to tell you, then I'm no help of you, for you. There's no help. The point here is not destructive criticism. Destructive criticism is never good. But constructive criticism is good. And it's important. Without constructive criticism, we ourselves will not be good. Imagine if you're a scientist in anything. I don't care if you're a social scientist, if you're a chemist, if you're a physician, if you're a physicist, a mathematician, and you don't accept any challenge of your theories. You're never going to be a scholar. You're never going to be refined. Your knowledge is never going to become better. Right? I always say at Medina, not just here, everywhere, the clash of mind is so critical and important. The clash of hearts is not. Clash of hearts is wrong. But the clash of minds yields the best. Please come and criticize constructively. This is how we can all grow. This is how we can all yield the best. Scientists only became scientists through what? Constructive criticism of all theories before and what they negotiate. A hypothesis is a theory yet to be proven. That's how we prove things. So, but unfortunately we're at a level lately where the sentimentals have been so, how do you say, aggrandized. They've been so amplified. But I always say, deceived you, deceived you, cheated you, and never genuinely advised you. Those who inflate your sense of self-awesomeness. They inflate it to the point that you become prey to the intellectual hyenas and theories out there. Rather, affirm that you have awesome potential, and you're already awesome, and you have awesome potential, and every human being is awesome at a basic level of لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. That's awesome, that's good, alright? But that we need to work and improve ourselves continuously to be better people. I think that's the idea that we need to also teach, and I think constructive criticism is important. rather than, and destructive is malicious. There's no place for destructive criticism, but constructive, there's all the place for it. So I think that's important. When we come to the aspect of a value system and akhlaq that we need to impart, society has that. Here in Norway, in the United States, where I spent 37 years of my life, and other places, people have, all human beings have basic common values, mostly, most human beings. Don't worry about the categories that we categorize people and the othering of people. People want to have a decent life. People pursue happiness. People want justice. People pursue that. Liberty. People want to be free. We share these things. In the US, obviously, it's in our Constitution, right? In the justice, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Hey, I mean, we all seek it. So we can build on these things, and we share with the wider population most of the good values, universal values that people have. All right. So Muslims they emphasize on something, and that doesn't make us, in a sense, antagonistic to society, but it makes us, to who don't have these things. On the contrary, it makes us want to positively contribute. It makes us understand and want to stand always ready to share good thoughts, good ideas, without coercion, without forcing them, without anything. But hey, we have an idea and we're trying to live this way. We're trying to do it this way. And then also share and emphasize common values. And not divide society, but unite society. Because Islam teaches us that unity should not mean conformity. Muslims are not one ethnicity, are they? You have black, white, and everything in between, don't you? I mean, that's what Muslims are. What is Muslim? Muslim is not an ethnicity. Muslim is not a specific culture. Muslims could be anything and everybody, and that's very important. So it's inclusive by definition. It's non-discriminatory by definition. Like Al-Quran tells us, "Inna akramakum inda Allahi atqakum." The most honorable amongst you are those who positively contribute best. Got nothing to do with your nation and tribe and who you come from and who you are, etc., etc. So I think these things are important. And let me finish with this, because I think I've talked too much, but and I've been saying that for a while. For mosques and Muslim organizations, so for the parents, again, I think they need to be involved. You need to own the place. If you don't bring your children to the masjid, if you don't bring them to events, don't expect them to eventually to come to the masjid and be part of it and do anything. Is it easy? No, you have to take the time. You have to take the effort. That's part of the tarbiyah. That's part of the process. If you don't do that, don't expect them to wake up one day and decide, you know what, I'm going to start going to the masjid. Well, my father never took me, so it must have been not important. I grew up not going. It wasn't part of my life. And if it's not part of your life, it's going to take a miracle, divine intervention for them to come and be part. So I want to urge you, wherever you are, wherever your masjid is, wherever it is, take heart and own up. Don't wait for others to cater for you. No one's going to cater for you. You have to create that process. You have to be part of it. And it will pay. Why? Well, Allah does not waste the deeds of those who do good. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah does not waste the deeds of those who do good. The second thing I want to say also, focus on important things. Since you will be part of the masjid, let's say any masjid, ask about character, akhlaq. Children need to learn learn Muhammadan characters, akhlaq. And I think that's very important. If we can somehow try to put these things as practical courses, not just theoretical courses, I think we can actually raise children and provide them some definitions. You have to increase also your social aspects of life. I know we live in a time where everyone is busy. They go from the morning, they come in the evening, they don't have no time to do anything. You have to take time. You have to take time out. Like I said, the process of tarbiyah or upbringing requires time investment. If you outsource it anywhere else, you're going to get whatever it is. And whatever goes in their mind, whatever goes in their heart. So let me stop here, inshallah. And then I'll open the floor for questions, comments, or criticism. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
I have a 6-year-old.
How do you explain?
Hellfire, Jahannam.
First of all, we need to introduce the creator of all to our children as Al-Wadu, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. What's the first verse you read in the Fatiha? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, Ar-Rahman, the most compassionate, the most merciful, if you want to say. But you know, Ar-Rahman does not mean the most merciful, really, in a sense, because Ar-Rahman, it has a root, 3-letter root is Ra, Ha, Mim, Rahim. And Rahim in the Arabic language means womb of the mother. In medicine we call it uterus, but really its non-medical term is womb, Rahim. And that's why we say Silatul Rahim, being good to those of kin, of relations. And you know, the womb of the mother does not provide mercy only. Provides love, mercy, protection, nourishment, sustaining, provision, you name it. So when we say in the name of Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, we're saying in the name of Allah, the all-loving, the all-merciful, the all-protecting, the all-sustaining, the all-nourishing, the etc., 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 in a way that's applicable to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we want to introduce the creator of Allah, the creator of the people, the creator of all, Allah Azza wa Jal, to our children from His names. Right? And from His names, how He introduced Himself first with that. But we also, when we talk about justice, we also believe that Allah is Al-Adl, the just. Right? مَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. If you do an atom worth of good, you'll see. If you do an atom worth of evil, you'll see. Since we know the Creator is just, well, that means what? If someone kills people, rapes people, burns children, kills children, there's going to be repercussion for that. And we believe that the Creator will hold them accountable and they'll be subject to torment in whichever way Allah knows. But introduce the Creator of all to your children, that He is the all-loving Creator, the all-merciful, that's how He introduced Himself. And you repeat it in every salah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Why do you think it's always there? Why do you think you repeat it in every salah, in every Fatiha? That emphasis, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim one more time. It's not coincidental. It's for a reason. And that's the emphasis here. So don't move away from the emphasis. And the justice aspect must be also taught as part of justice. Because Allah is just in what He does. Yes. I'll wrap up quickly if you don't have to ask questions. Teachers always say a class that doesn't ask questions is one of two. Either they know everything or they don't know anything. I assume you know everything, so. Alright, go ahead.
I'm wondering if you have any advice as parents working against a society that, parents in a society that basically works against them. Let's say it like that. When you have the school system that is teaching your kids something else, you have the society as a whole that is teaching you something contrary to what you are teaching your kids. Going to the masjid is one thing. Trying to have them be with good friends is another thing. What more advice would you give us as parents?
Look, I always want to say let's work with society, not against society, because it's we have to work with this. We can't exist in. So we have to teach our children that society has lots of good things, but also as a parent you have cultural, religious, and language expectations from your children, which is your right. It's your right to have language expectations that say you want your children to speak whatever language you like. Let's say that that's your right. It's something that you should be able to have as a parent. Cultural expectations, religious expectations. So we'll have to teach them that society has lots of good, and we don't want the children to go out in society where they have things against society, or thinking that society is against them. We want to sort of smooth the edges and say society is wide. There's the good, the bad, and ugly in society, like us. So let's try to take the good and leave the bad. That's the idea. There's lots of good, let's take the good. The bad from us and others, we leave it. And this is my expectation of you. Religiously, culturally, language-wise. Let's say you want them to speak Norwegian, obviously, and they should be. But let's say I want to teach them Swahili, or I want to teach them whatever language, Urdu, or whatever, Arabic. I should be able also for the children to have, I should be able to have my language expectations also from the children. So I think it's about setting out the expectations from the children and speaking about these things that we all want and agree and see good in society, and speaking also about the expectations that you don't expect to have, that you think are not necessarily consistent with your religious, cultural, linguistic values from society. But if you don't speak about them and you assume children will pick it up on their own, that might be an issue. So then also that's not enough, you need reinforcement. So like you mentioned, reinforcement becomes masjid, reinforcement becomes activities, reinforcement becomes widening social relationships, right? And that's important. Sometimes we all are tired in the weekends. Take it from me, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't have really any weekends. But let's say, when I used to have weekends, I don't want to go anywhere, I'm tired, let me just calm down. Maybe it's important to take the children and have them socialize with children where we share same values and stuff like that, so that they can also have a social aspect. So it's very important. You can't take them out and not give them an alternative. So, and that brings me to something also very important. We need to develop good, clean Islamic alternatives for children. Entertainment, I'm talking about. Right, entertainment-wise, because you can't tell them you can't watch this movie, you can't watch that movie, and then just sit with me here in the kitchen. You're boring, ma. That's what they're gonna tell you. Okay, what do I do then? You know, you have to be creative also in getting them engaged and providing good, clean alternatives. Now, my mind is not good enough on its own. Maybe me, you, all of you together, we can come and say, all right, let's do a cultural night at the masjid, right? Or at some other place, let's do a culture night, let's do something. Whether it's seeing a show or seeing something that, whatever it is, depending on your fiqh as well, you know, music, if you fiqh allows music, or whatever it is, art. I don't see a problem in all that, to be honest with you. I don't see a problem in music, I see a problem in the lyrics. I don't see a problem in the art, I see the problem in the message it conveys, if it's the wrong message. If the art, some art, but most art is really fine in general, right, etc., etc., etc. Poetry, get them involved. That's the age. where let them be, they like physics, let's grow their hobbies. They like mathematics, let's open for them. Let's put them in math clubs. Right? They like poetry. Let's teach them poetry. They like literature. Let's invest in developing their skills when they can. Why? If you don't invest in that, they're going to grow other things. And like they say, the idle mind is a devil's playground. All right. But it's a group effort too. It's not just, that's why I'm saying it's very important to create a community. I know we all work, we all have responsibility. We have to take the time and come and say, all right, maybe all of you together, what should we do in 2 weeks from now? What should we, let's do something that's good for all of us. And storm your ideas, and you won't agree all the time, and that's fine. But not doing anything is not an option, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's just a comment, but the things which have just been asked, there's a strong movement of this LGBTQ going on, and they're targeting very young children, in kindergarten. And,
in kindergarten?
Yeah, it is. And the kids come home and they ask kind of very difficult questions. Why can I wear a skirt? Or the boy asks, when can I buy a purse, etc. Which is, for us, clearly going against our religion. So I get the comment about going along with the community and the society as a whole, but I think there is a line here which is not to be crossed. Do you have any comments on that?
So look, the idea is this. It's important to afford every human being, because Islam does affords every human being justice and equality. And what people do from a religious perspective, if we think it's a sin, then nobody can change religions. At the same time, like I was telling the sister here, as a parent, you have an expectation from your children. Cultural maybe, religious maybe, linguistic, language expectations. And I think it's within the parents' rights to teach the children, son or daughter, this is our religious expectations from you. Now, this is not to discriminate against others. I would like us to focus more inwardly rather than outwardly. So, because we don't want to go and sound, though we're not, but even sound that we're demeaning the other. That's not because we're not taught to demean the others. But we're not supposed to agree with everything all the time anyway. That makes you a person who doesn't think. You're allowed to think. You're allowed to have your views, so long your views are non-violent and do not incite hate against others. So I think setting your expectation in the house, and what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, is within the parents' rights. Without teaching hate, but saying, look, if someone does a wrong thing and we think it's a sin, then the religion tells us it's a sin. And what we expect is this, what we expect is that, what we expect is this. So it's important to speak about our expectations, whether they're linguistic, cultural, or religious. I think, and that's, as a parent, I think you have that right to do. And maybe the obligation as well. Yes. Any other comment or criticism?
So, our sister is wondering how we can...
Oh, she can't speak for herself? Okay. So we have a wakil who's speaking on behalf of someone else. All right, go ahead.
She's wondering how we can put the love of the Prophet...
Let her keep wondering. She's wondering. Yes. Any other comment, concern, or criticism?
How do we make if your son is like Bali, he has to pray. How do we make that like it's in the beginning maybe difficult to not you don't know the love of God, you don't know it's like a chore that you have to do. how to find a balance, how to introduce.
It doesn't start when they become baligh, Sheikh, right?
No, you have to start introducing.
So when we start taking them to the masjid with us, at home, remember when I said at home, if you're at home, Salatul Fajr is Jama'ah, why shouldn't it be? If you're not praying Jama'ah at home, and don't expect them, to pray it eventually with their children. But if you pray, and after you go, they say, hey, Allah have mercy on my father's soul. He would wake us up for Fajr. We would pray Maghrib and Isha together. That's important. That sets the stage for you, for them. Then it's always, eventually guidance is only with Allah. We cannot guide people. Only Allah guides people. But what we do, we try to live in a way that's conducive to that kind of behavior that we expect. But if we just keep it theory, you have to pray, you have to pray, you have to pray, oftentimes they will not pray. Well, theory. So it's really live by example. Bring them to the masjid. This is fard. Speaking about it, living it, I think that does it. Wallahu a'lam. And lots of dua. I don't want to forget something did not mention. You remember Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam? Abraham, when he built the Kaaba, what did he first do? He says, Allah says on his behalf, وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَعِيلُ رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. The second is what? رَبَّنَا وَجْعَلْنَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ لَكَ وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِنَا أُمَّةً مُسْلِمَةً لَكَ. Ya Allah, make us amongst the Muslimeens to you. Ibrahim and Ismail are making the dua. Ya Allah, Ibrahim, Sayyidina Ibrahim, Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam, they're saying to Allah, Ya Allah, Rabbana ja'alna muslimayn lak. Ya Allah, make us Muslims to you. وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِنَا, and our children, make them also Muslims to you. What does that teach us? What's one of the most important job of parents, in addition to doing the effort and investing time? Making dua for the children. Oftentimes the parents forget to make dua for their children. They don't actually make dua for their children. And they really plead to Allah and beg Him, Ya Allah, جعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك. It's the obvious. And that repetition of the plea, and the repetition of the plea, Ya Allah. Do not give up. If you give up hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if hope in Islam, as you all know, hopelessness is faithlessness. Right? إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ, Allah says. So therefore, the dua for the children on daily basis is so, I cannot stress it enough. I have to catch myself. Alright, so, yes ma'am.
One question. My daughter was at camping for 1 week with the class, and she's been really good at praying 5 times a day with our parents. But when she was at camping, she had very much trouble to find a place to do wudu, and it was a different kind of challenge, and nobody else was doing. So it is like she wanted to, but it was very difficult because of the circumstances. Do you have any words or something?
Yes, that's good. First of all, Allah bless her for doing that. And may Allah Ta'ala grant her hidayah and guidance and steadfastness, and all of us and our children. Now, look, when you're traveling, you're camping and traveling, Islam made it also easy. If you're traveling, especially if you're traveling some days, number one, you can combine the prayers, kind of shorten the prayers, right? So the 4 rak'ah becomes 2. You don't have to pray the sunnah. You could if you have time, but if you don't have time, you just pray your fard. So Fajr is 2, becomes Dhuhr becomes 2, Asr becomes 2, Maghrib's 3, Isha 2. So now you're shortened. And then where do you need to pray? Anywhere. You don't have to have the janamaz, or you don't have to have the carpet. You can, anything dry and clean and facing Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. So it's really very simple. You don't need to complicate life about it. And you do the minimal if you're traveling, and you're good. Inshallah. But there is no reason not to pray, and prayer is important. I think we touched base on it at the beginning of the lecture, and I think the important thing here is not to be afraid of atheism or any other set of ideology, but to actually put it all on the table and say, this is what we believe, this is what other people believe, this is what, let's say, people who don't believe, let's say, Hawkins and Dawkins understandings, right? This is what they are. I think it's important to not simply put out saying, here, believe in this. I don't think that's the right approach. I think the right approach, number one, obviously, is to explain faith and let them experience faith. And there has to be conviction, because faith without conviction is not really faith. And if you just make it a matter of faith rather than a matter of philosophical fact, consistent with the science, I'm not going to say necessarily scientific, but I'm going to say not inconsistent with scientific foundings, spiritual and theological, and put all that together, I think you should come to some kind of conclusion. So inshallah, I'll try to spend some more time on it tomorrow when we talk about the Godhood and the concept of Godhood. But I don't believe that the idea, and that's where mosques come in. Why? Because they can bring some experts on the field and they can unpack things in a neutral, academically neutral way. It must be academically neutral, because strength is when you articulate your opponent's points as well as you articulate your own. Otherwise, it's not strength. And I don't think we should have any issues. But that's where mosques come in, and these workshops, and repeated workshops. In my view, I'll tell you, I spent probably the whole 90s, from 1990 to maybe before started 1988 till 2000, only on Tawheed. I figured I'm not teaching anything else. I'm just teaching the Tahawiyya creed, or creed, articles of faith, Godhood. Who is Allah Azza wa Jal? Nothing else. I did not teach law, fiqh. I did not teach tazkiyah. I did not teach anything as much as I was focused. And I think that focus is very important. And maybe mosques and Islamic centers and all that, they keep these workshops over and over, because it always increases your faith. And also, especially when you tackle questions and doubts and issues like that. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
This is a more a comment. I think when you are talking about children, if you do something good in your life, every little thing you do, you could tell your children, if they say, Mom, this is very nice, and you can say, this is because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us. Every little thing you do, it doesn't have to be big things, but if you do something, you have some nice routines, you do some good deeds, or you are nice to someone, you are smiling, you can connect it. The reason why I'm doing it is not because mommy is nice, it's because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good
Because all the good we do, we learned it from the Prophet ﷺ Sunnah anyway. So you're just simply relaying. Yeah, absolutely.
Connected to the previous question, I want to know what is the right age for the child to understand these a little complex concepts of God and everything. So on which age we should introduce these things to the children? Is there any scientific
Look, Islamically speaking, everyone is accountable at puberty. That's accountability. That's technical, official accountability from a law perspective, right? But other than that, I think it's children will grow in front of you, and you can see of their questions, and that's good. Encourage questions, and open these discussions, and lead them to these meanings and these facts. So I think every parent will see it from their children when they start asking questions. That's they're telling you, I'm ready. Any other question? Yes, sir.
I want to come back to the topic of pride, because I think that parents today are facing a new challenge that our parents didn't face when we were raised. And you said that every parent has the right to tell their children what is right and wrong. but we have had cases in Norway where schools have taken their children to pride parades against the parents' wishes or without the parent knowing of it. So how do you deal with that when your right to say something is actually limited?
So I don't know about the laws in this country well to make a legal comment. I don't know what your legal rights are. In the United States, you have the right to opt out as a parent. I don't know about the legal rights here, so therefore I won't be able to make a comment. This is a legal question more than a religious question. The religious question I've already answered. But the legal question, what can you do, I don't really know. I don't know what the law allows versus what the law does not allow. In the US, parents have the right to opt out of any classes or any activities that contain things that they don't agree with in that sense. But I can't advise you legally, sorry. You need to have a lawyer who understands the law and what can you do and what can't you do. Any other question, comment, or concern, or criticism? Okay, khair, inshallah. So I think we'll stop here. There's the question that the sister did not want to ask herself, but she had someone else ask on her behalf. Love, the question about love. Love is not an indoctrination. The love of Allah Azza wa Jal, the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the love of the awliya, the love of the salihin, the love of good things. This is not an indoctrination. It's an experience, and it's a thing of the heart. And I think when we put in, and we live, I shouldn't say put, when we live a life of the love of Allah Azza wa Jal means something into our hearts and our behaviors. The love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam means something to us. The love of the awliya and the salihin means something. It's not just lip service. I think the children pick that up. They're smart. Children are smart. They'll pick up that, you know what? I will never forget, let's say, my own father, Allah have mercy on his soul, when he used to visit some of the pious or righteous people, the adab that he shows, the khidmah that he shows, etc. These things that's how we learned, right? So if I saw my own father, let's say, kiss the hand of his elder sister because she was so righteous, how would I treat my own great aunt, my own aunt, right? So these things are observational. You can't say to someone love. Love is not a prescribed pill. Love is an experience rather than a prescription. And it's the way you do it. How did the Sahaba? I'll give you this example and I'll finish with that. Hadith al-Sahih, Sahih al-Bukhari al-Hadith. Quraysh, in the negotiation with the Prophet ﷺ, all of you know that is known as the Hudaybiyah Accord, Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, right? Quraysh sent a chief negotiator to negotiate on its behalf with the Prophet ﷺ. And they chose a man not from Mecca, because the Meccans were so antagonistic to the Prophet ﷺ. They were against him. They didn't even want to, they just wanted the sword. They want to kill him and kill all the Sahaba. So they chose someone who's more of a diplomat, not a warrior, a diplomat warrior, right? Because the warrior, military guy wants to kill. The diplomat wants to kill by negotiation. So they sent Urwa bin Mas'ud al-Thaqafi from Ta'if, about 40 miles or so from Mecca. He's a chief negotiator. He's very seasoned. The man is a international personality. He used to travel to meet with the kings and the rulers of the world at that time. So they figured, you know what? If you met Khosrow of Persia and you met Caesar of Rome, you can be our negotiator. So they tapped on him and he became the chief negotiator, a diplomat of a very fine level, right? This Urwa ibn Mas'ud. So he led the delegation, and you know what diplomats do, right? Whenever they go to another country, they see and they write, they take notes, mental notes to say the least. So Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi is going to the Prophet ﷺ's camp and to see the Sahaba with the Prophet ﷺ, and he's taking notes to go back to Quraysh because he's negotiating. So Sahih al-Bukhari mentions the hadith where he saw the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they're fighting over the remainder of the water of wudu of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who's going to take it first and who's this, and how they treat the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how they revere him and how they honor him alayhi wa ala alihi afdalus salat wa azka salam, to the point that Urwa bin Mas'ud al-Thaqafi, this seasoned diplomat, international diplomat, was overtaken. He went back to Mecca. He said, first thing he told them, there is no way you will win over this man. They look at him, wait, give us your report first. What do you mean? You give us the conclusion? He told them, Ya qawm, O people, I have met the king of Persia in his palace, and I have visited the king of Rome in his palace. I have never ever witnessed someone beloved by his companions like the companions of Muhammad loved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Never. And that kind of love and that kind of devotion, there is no way you will ever win over him. No way. No matter how much power you have. Eventually, he became Muslim. Not at that time. Eventually, Urwa Mas'ud, he embraced Islam and he became Muslim. So, love is what you see and what you experience more than what you say. If I tell you I love you, okay, you like it because it sounds good, right? I mean, you know, even if you lie, if you don't mean it, still I love you sounds good. You know, a lot of people tell me, just tell me I love you anyway, it doesn't matter, just say something, right? But imagine if you mean it, that's the idea. Right? So, Allahu A'lam. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.